Have you ever had chocolate, drank a Pepsi, a Coke, or a Mountain Dew? Have you ever taken Excedrin or other headache medicines? If you have, then you have had caffeine. And just like everything that we put into our body, we should know what it's doing to it. According to a data brief by the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, in a single day, 50% of the population in the US will drink a soda, and 70% of those drinks will be caffeinated. Tie that with the ever-popular chocolate bar and over-the-counter headache drugs like Excedrin, we live in a highly caffeinated culture that only a few of us are now a part of. I have personally grown up with a type of ADD and suffer as well from high anxiety disorder, both of which are extremely sensitive to stimulants. ADD being known to respond well to them most of the time, and anxiety responding poorly. This has led me to have an interest in the effects that caffeine can have on the body, and I have given a considerable amount of time trying to understand how this affects me. And I want to share what I have learned, both the harmful and the useful effects of caffeine, with you. Benefits can include managing headaches, better awareness and response, and minimizing ADD, while harmful effects can include increased anxiety, poor sleep, and severe withdrawals. Now, there are several benefits to consuming caffeine. First that I'd like to talk about is about headache relief. Now, if you've ever taken a drug like Excedrin, then you have felt how caffeine can help alleviate headaches and other minor pains. Caffeine is often combined with ibuprofen or acetaminophen in over-the-counter drugs to provide relief for migraines and headaches. Through a fairly thorough study by Diamond Seymour called Ibuprofen plus Caffeine in the Treatment of Tension-Type Headaches, it is shown that a combination of caffeine with ibuprofen has a shorter reaction time and is shown to cause relief to more patients than the two drugs administered separately. Now, instructions should always be followed, and moderation should always be considered when taking such drugs. Tolerance to caffeine can be built up if you take it too much, diminishing the effects that it has on headaches and migraines. Now, caffeine can also help with physical performance. Caffeine generally helps one with better performance when the performance is negatively affected by reduced alertness, for example, when one suffers from sleep deprivation or general fatigue. Caffeine is a stimulant that affects the central nervous system, including the brain. And this is according to a study by the FDA in 2007. In Griffiths and Rollins' article called Caffeine Pharmacology Effects, it was republished in 2003, this caffeine can diminish the effects caused by sleep and fatigue, these effects by sleep and fatigue can stem reaction time and awareness, and diminishing these effects can increase endurance and performance under poor conditions. This creates several benefits that are appealing to both the serious and casual athlete, or even to improve results at the gym. They can be used before a game if one was extremely tired, or if one didn't have a lot of sleep and wanted to still work out at the gym and have the energy to do so. Now I'd like to discuss the benefits that caffeine can have on ADD. In Attention Deficit Disorder, The Unfocused Mind in Children and Adults by Brown, ADD is a symptom that is often misunderstood and misdiagnosed. People who suffer from it often experience a difficulty to focus or a lack of attention while being able to hyperfocus on a few particular things, but at the cost of a loss of awareness outside of the particular activity. This symptom causes a lack of stimulus in the brain, which can make it hard to give attention to things that do not overtly stimulate the person or their personal interests. Caffeine is a natural stimulant that affects the brain, as stated previously. This can help stimulate a potentially understimulated person with ADD, allowing them to focus with much greater intent. Have you ever had so much trouble focusing that your head becomes cloudy and tasks that should be completed quickly take much longer? I felt this all the time with my ADD, and I felt the personal benefits that stimulants such as caffeine can offer, like helping me focus on the mundane and completing a trivial task. And this includes largely academics, helping me focus better in class and to do better in schoolwork. There are just a few benefits. These are just a few benefits that studies have confirmed, not to mention or include benefits that that an individual might feel they derive personally from caffeine. Now, unfortunately, even though there are benefits, there are many negative side effects that can go along with the consumption of caffeine. Now, these are just some of the harmful effects that can go along with caffeine. There can be an increase in anxiety. And anxiety is described in the Webster Dictionary as a painful or apprehensive uneasiness in mind, usually over an impending or anticipated ill. For those who suffer from this constantly, or in other words, have an anxiety disorder, this is a feeling that can exist perpetually and can occur over insignificant events. Caffeine doses over 200 milligrams have shown to increase anxiety in people and can even induce anxiety attacks in those not normally prone to have them. In the same article by Griffiths and Rollins, we read those with previous existing anxiety conditions also tend to be more sensitive to caffeine effects. Those with pre-existing conditions have reported greater anxiety attached to the use of caffeine. Along with anxiety, caffeine is also shown to affect one's sleep. Caffeine is shown to exit out of one's system in an average of 4 to 6 hours, but can vary incredibly depending on age, health, metabolism, and natural sensitivity. So again, while these effects are typical and based on averages, this does not necessarily depict any one individual's reaction to caffeine. Now, while the drug remains in your system, however, the increased awareness and energy can also affect how fast you can fall asleep and the quality of sleep that you will have. Meaning, 8 hours of sleep may not be the same. It may not be as effective as 8 hours of sleep without caffeine. Caffeine consumption before you sleep will generally cause poor sleep, as many college students can most likely attest to. Studies have even seen cases where high amounts of caffeine, over 200 milligrams, will cause disruption in sleep when consumed even early in the morning. Desensitization to caffeine can minimize these effects, but it can still negatively affect sleep patterns, even if it becomes unnoticeable to consumers, according to the articles by Griffiths and Rollins. This means even if you think you're getting good night's sleep, you might be able to be getting better if you were able to have caffeine completely out of your system. Now, the last one that I would like to talk about in this talk are about withdrawals, because unfortunately what goes up must come down, and the same is true with caffeine. Continuing on with Griffiths and Rollins' talk, we find that withdrawal symptoms are often what are complained about most in the consumption of caffeine, and are people's main incentive to not stop taking caffeine. You find this a lot with people that drink coffee every day, several cups. They often can't. You'll hear them talk about how they often can't operate in the morning without the first cup of coffee. And it's because symptoms of withdrawal can happen almost immediately depending on how sensitized you are to it. Now, the most common effect of caffeine withdrawal is a headache. Ironic, since as we already learned, caffeine also helps minimize the headaches. But too much can actually increase the problem. Now, it also causes irritability, a difficulty to concentrate, and increased fatigue, a stiffness in the muscles. The severity and length depend upon the severity and length of withdrawal symptoms increase with larger daily doses of caffeine and longer continued use of caffeine. Meaning someone that's been drinking caffeine or taking caffeine for a week will not necessarily have the same withdrawal length as someone who has been taking it for a full year. This can also differ, again, on individual depending on health, age, and a few other minor factors. So again, while these are atypical based on averages, this is not necessarily a depiction of what you might feel, see, and experience. Now, we know several effects, both the good and the bad, of the consumption of caffeine. These studies are meant to serve as a guide to help one decide for himself whether or not to include caffeine, and by how much. We see that while there can be benefits, the larger amount of caffeine that one takes, the larger problems they face, you should also take into consideration one's sensitivity and other parameters that might enlarge or diminish consequences of caffeine intake. For most, taking caffeine out of one's diet is impractical, but hopefully with this information, it'll best be utilized. Thank you.